Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Lakhman, your host for today, and welcome back to another episode of Heavy Hitters. Today, I am joined by Christian Gardner and Tommy Rinaldi, and we'll be getting down into UFC 260. But before we delve right into it, how are you guys doing today?
I'm doing great. Glad to be with you guys once again back on this show and joined by Tommy this time. Gonna be a great show.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm doing really well. I think this is the most screen time I'll have in PTV, my 4 or 5 years being associated with it. So I'm very excited.
All right, boys, we have another great night of UFC on Saturday. Headlining the night, we have Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou. But before we get into the main event, let's start off with Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Thomas Almeida. So Sugar Sean was an up and comer in the UFC and was predicted to be a title contender and possibly the next champion of his division. However, back in August, he got absolutely, I don't want to say destroyed, but pretty convincingly beat. And according to him, it was a fluke loss. And he's looking to come back and reestablish himself as a contender in the division. However, Thomas Almeida was also once a future star, but due to a couple of losses and prolonged inactivity, his stock has taken a bit of a toll. But regardless of what's been going on recently with them, both of them are extremely lethal finishers. So, with that being said, what are the keys to the victory for both of these fighters?
I think for me, it's just so surprising that O'Malley already said to bet on Almeida. I think it's just something to follow and see where his head is at going into this after that huge loss. But you talked about it, Joe. These are two fantastic finishers, great hitters. So for me, it's going to be whoever is continuously making good contact. And I mean, for our main man O'Malley, I think put the world on storm with this one punch hit that ended that fight. So I think for him, it's going to be a lot about his confidence going into this.
And he surely has a ton of confidence. I've actually met him in person. He is exuding confidence at all levels, especially in the ring. And because of his height, he's 5'11. For 135, that is extremely tall. Thomas Almeida is only 5'7. So he's going to use that range and his striking ability to really set the tone for how this fight's going to go. And you mentioned that one punch knockout against Eddie Wineland. That's not something you see at 135, and he's been able to do it. But Thomas Almeida is a very good fighter, both on the feet and on the ground. So this will be a fun one to watch. Potential fight of the night with this one.
Definitely, like you said, Tommy, he definitely has the physical advantages when it comes to this fight. But as we saw in his last fight back in August, there are some holes in his game that he has to shore up. And in my opinion, for him to win this fight, he might have to have a perfect performance to win and reestablish himself as a title contender in the division. But with that being said, who do you guys think is going to come out with the victory in this one?
I'm going with O'Malley, even though he said not to. I'm gonna agree with him that that first loss was a fluke, and he can come back and put it together and possibly with a knockout.
Yeah, those low calf kicks that we saw against Chito Vera, those are lethal, and we saw it against O'Malley. But similar to Christian, I will also pick O'Malley. I think he is one of the better strikers within the division and within the UFC as a whole. Um, Almeida's on a 4 fight out of his last 5 fight loss streak against some really good competitors within the division. So he has a lot to prove, but I think O'Malley wants to prove he's still undefeated in his own eyes. So I think he's going to get the win.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with you guys. I am also going to take Sugar Sean just because, I mean, I love this guy. He's so entertaining. We both love Joe Rogan, so we've got some things in common. So I do think he's going to win and hopefully put on a good show for us, knock this guy out quickly, like he's known to do in the past. But anyway, moving on to the next fight on the card, we're going to be talking about Tyron Woodley versus Vicente Luque. Now, for me, this is a really interesting one because I, for one, am a huge fan of both of these guys. Tyron Woodley, we all know he was the apex predator of the division until Kamaru Usman came and, let's be honest, literally just dominated him in every fashion. And it was a very disappointing performance for him. And ever since then, to me, he just really hasn't looked the same, which is really, really interesting, especially since that title loss came right after what is debatably his best performance against Darren Till. So now he comes into this fight with a lot to prove, and he might possibly be fighting for his career. It's not going to be an easy fight. Vicente Luque is a young dude. He's hungry for a title shot. So he definitely has his work cut out for him. So, what are the keys to the win for both of these guys? We'll start with you, Tommy.
Yeah, like you said, this is really a fight for Tyron's career. He hasn't won a round, not even a match, a round since 2018. His last 3 fights, he has been 5-0'd 3 times, and it's not good to see. He is one of the best champions that we've had at 170, and he really does have explosive power, both within his wrestling and within his striking. So he is always a threat. But Vicente Luque, he has 11 knockouts and 6 submission wins. That's a really good finisher within this division. 170 is one of the stronger divisions that the UFC has. And he's on a win streak of 12 of his last 14. That's an amazing record. Those losses are to some of the best people within the division, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Leon Edwards, who's trying to make his case for the number 1 contender within the division. So this fight is going to be very interesting to see. I think if Luque could keep him at distance and keep Tyron working slow like he has been his past couple fights, I think the volume that he will put out will ultimately win this fight for Luque.
For me, Woodley, he's shown so many times in the past what his hitting can be. He has such a heavy right hand, and then he has a great counterattack as well. And I think that he can also wrestle if necessary, and that's what he showed against Lawler in that championship fight. But that was years ago. So at this point, I think for him, he just really needs this win. And for him to put it together, he has to put some of his best fighting in the octagon that we've seen in some time.
Yeah, definitely. It is definitely going to take his absolute best to put away Vicente Luque, or even for a decision at that fact. And when you look at these guys, even though they've had the same amount, or roughly the same amount of pro fights, it really is veteran versus prospect in this one. Tyron Woodley, he has a lot more experience, and Vicente Luque, again, is still a young guy, even though he has fought a lot and proven himself in the division. So, who do you think is going to come out with the win in this one?
Again, I think Luque has this one. We haven't seen Tyron look himself in a long time. Even with some of those title fights that he's had, he really does rely on that one big rush that's going to knock someone out. But both of these guys have really good chins. And I think Luque could either take this one by decision or maybe even a sub on the ground. We'll see.
I'm going to go with Woodley because out of necessity. He needs to win this to stay relevant within the UFC. And I just want this for him because he's been one of my favorite fighters. And to stay up there within the UFC, he needs to win on Saturday.
I'm going to go with Vicente Luque on this one because the recent performances that we have seen from Tyron Woodley just have not been convincing to me, to say the least. He just doesn't seem to have that will. He doesn't seem to have that drive to want to win anymore. And it is very upsetting. To me, he was one of my favorite fighters and still is. And that's why I hate to go with Vicente Luque on this one, but I think I just have to. I just don't see Tyron Woodley getting the job done, but I would love for him to prove me wrong on this one. But anyway, before we get into the main event, boys, let's talk about the fight that was supposed to happen tomorrow night, but now is not going to happen. Alexander Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega. So everything was looking good in this one. They both got into the bubble, but a couple days ago, Volkanovski actually tested positive for COVID, and now the fight has been scratched. I was really looking forward to this one, even though personally I wanted to see Volkanovski versus Holloway Part 3, just because of how good Holloway looked in his last fight. I mean, it was an exceptional performance. But anyway, how upset are you guys that this fight isn't gonna happen now?
Personally, this one's crushing. I thought this was going to be fight of the night. I love both of these fighters. Volkanovski has put up amazing performances against some of the best that 145 has to offer. Max made a case for being the best 145 in the world, and he beat him twice. And in my opinion, he beat him pretty handedly. That second fight was a little bit closer, but he has about 8 rounds out of 10, in my opinion. That's just me. But Brian Ortega, we saw T-City 2.0. His striking looks so much better, and this is a fight that's eventually going to happen, but I wish we got this one for this night. But I really wish we got to see this one.
Yeah, very unfortunate. These are two of great fighters, and maybe you'll get what you want, Joe, with Max Holloway next round, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, like you said, Tommy, this is gonna happen regardless. We don't know when, but hopefully it will soon. Maybe we'll get Max Holloway Part 3 first. I wouldn't be opposed to that. But regardless, let's move on to the big boys. The reason why we're here. Stipe Miocic versus Francis Ngannou. And oh my god, am I excited for this one. Francis Ngannou is just a genuinely terrifying human being. He's the type of person, if he walks up to me in the lunchroom, asks for my lunch money, I'll give him everything. I don't care. I'll even give him my wheelchair if he wants it. Sure, go ahead, take it. Because we all know what he can do to people. It is terrifying. Ever since he did lose to Stipe in that fight and the subsequent fight that he did win against Derek Lewis, it was incredibly boring. But ever since then, he has quite literally been taking people's heads off. It is absolutely insane what he is doing in the octagon. And the total time for his fights, it takes less time for him to knock someone out than it takes for me to make a DiGiorno pizza. Like, it's actually insane what he has been doing to people. So we all know that he has power, and we all know Stipe can wrestle. So what are the keys to the win for both of these guys? We'll start with you, Christian.
I'm gonna go with how well can Stipe avoid the big shot from Ngannou, because of course he is a monster, like you said, Joe. And if it goes into championship rounds, will that take a toll on Ngannou? You talked about how quickly he's able to put people away. If this thing goes full 5 rounds as he continues to throw and throw and throw, how tired will he be when we get to round 4 and 5? And will Stipe be able to take over? But then again, Ngannou is huge. So overall, this is just going to be a fantastic fight.
Yeah, speaking of that size advantage, on the day we're recording, they had their weigh-ins, and Ngannou came in at 263, which is near the limit of heavyweight, and Stipe came in at 234, which is pretty small for a heavyweight, especially for a champion. But to Christian's point of Ngannou with his cardio, that's something that we saw in the first fight between these two. He's been working at the UFC PI, the Performance Center in Las Vegas, and his nutrition, his cardio, everything of that nature has been really something that he's been working on throughout these years. And he's really looking in the best shape he's ever been. Ngannou might be the hardest hitter in boxing or in MMA ever. what he's done to Alistair Overeem and so many other heavyweights that have a chin and a half, it's truly terrifying, like Joe is saying. But Stipe is the best heavyweight of all time. He beat Daniel Cormier twice, who is arguably the GOAT. Without John Jones or without Stipe, DC would be the best fighter of all time. And he's beat him twice, back to back. Those body shots did a big toll on DC from Stipe. Stipe is not just a good wrestler, he's a really good boxer as well. He's very crisp, and he has great cardio. We've seen that throughout all his fights. That weight loss of being at 234 will also help with that cardio. So if he's performing at a high level, it's really hard to go against the champion, even though betting odds, Ngannou is the favorite.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing about Ngannou finishing these people so fast, and mind you, these are not bums. He's beaten Alistair Overeem. He's beaten Cain Velasquez. He's beaten, I mean, yeah, some of these guys are like champions of yesteryear, but still, you can't knock them. And he is just, again, just tearing them apart, destroying them. And but what I was getting into is that because he's beating everybody so fast, is that we really haven't seen his other skills materialize. Does he have the cardio? Does he have the takedown defense that ultimately made him lose the first time around? So anyway, with that being said, who wins this fight and how?
I'm going with Ngannou. I just love his striking. And I think one of those heavy shots is going to connect. Not necessarily going to be a knockout or anything like that, but I think there will be one of those shots that everyone screams for a second, and it will completely change the course of this fight.
Both of these guys are lovable. Both great. Stipe is a great champion. Ngannou would be a great champion, would be a superstar. We've seen Stipe eat some of his punches in the first fight, but I don't know. His power is getting stronger. I'm happy with either person winning. It's hard to go against the best of all time, even though that Ngannou is the power puncher that he is. So I think I'm going to go with Stipe.
This one is a really tough one for me. As I said before, I'm a huge fan of both of these guys, but because in my opinion, even though Stipe can definitely take some really big hits, I mean, we saw what happened in that first fight against DC. It didn't look like much, and then he was out cold. So what's going to happen when, Francis Ngannou, who literally has a Ford F-150 in each fist, just absolutely smashes his head? For that reason, I'm going to have to go Francis Ngannou. As much as I hate going against Stipe, I don't know how I can't pick Francis Ngannou in this one. So anyway, boys, last thing before we sign off. I mean, again, it's a great night of fights. A bunch of them, a lot of them to get the bonus of the night. What is your favorite fight of the night? What are you most looking forward to on Saturday?
I mean, is it cheap to just say the main event? Like, I mean, it's just too cheap to say that. Those are just two fantastic fighters. But if not, I still picked another fight to talk about, a highlight. Jared Gooden and Nurmagomedov. I think these two fighters, very interesting. They haven't been knocked down before, but both have 40% of knockouts in their wins. So we'll see if somebody actually gets knocked down in that fight.
Yeah, great picks. It is really hard to not pick the main event, but I think I will go with O'Malley versus Almeida. These are two really talented prospects that could really fly high within their division if they get this win tonight. So I'm expecting both of them to come out strong and really prove themselves.
For me personally, it is that Tyron Woodley fight, just because of, I guess you would say, the possible repercussions that it would have in the division. Does Tyron Woodley then go ahead and reclaim the division as his own? Again, I don't see that happening, but I would love that to happen. I love Tyron Woodley. I love both of these guys. So that for me is my fight of the night. Hopefully it doesn't disappoint. But with that being said, we are all done for today. Thank you everyone for watching. I have been Joe Lakhman. I was joined today by Christian Gardner and Tommy Rinaldi. Until next time, have a great night.